Hello, everyone. Love and blessings, and welcome to another episode of Dragonfly Heart Medicine Radio. I am your host, Kristen, and today I have a special guest with me. I've known her for a few years, and she's just a really beautiful soul and has a lot of wisdom to share. So I'm excited to see what topics come up today. So I'm going to go ahead and have her introduce herself and just share a little bit with why she decided to be on the podcast today.
Hey everyone, I'm Angela. I used to call myself like a soul alignment coach. I don't necessarily resonate with like particular titles or anything. So most of my work, I just use my name. If you follow me on any social medias, so I'm sure we have like cross followers. I feel like we have a lot of mutual friends in common. And yeah, Kristen, I always try to remember, like, where did we meet? Because we were friends for a long time online before we got to meet in Asheville one summer, where we got to meet in person. And I feel like when we finally met, it was just like, haven't we met in person before? Because it's like we had known each other for so long at that point, right, that it felt like we did, right? Like,
yeah, because I walked up and was like, "Hi, Angela," and you're just like, "Hey," and then it was just like, we knew exactly who each other were, and we just like jumped right into conversing as though we were like, BFFs, because I guess we kind of were already associated online. So,
well, and I also feel like too, when you're like that with people that you meet online and they're really more their authentic self versus like some persona, right? Where when you meet them, I know like back in the day when I used to do like online dating, I would meet people, it's like, yeah, you're not the person you're presenting yourself as, right? And so I feel like that's why it's like, it was just effortless when we connected, because we weren't trying to be anything other than just who we are.
I love that. Yeah. So I really enjoy following you on social media for that reason, because you are authentic and you don't like sugarcoat anything, and you'll just say whatever is on your heart, whatever is on your mind, without really worrying if people are going to like it or not.
And I also still feel like during a lot of like the collective pandemic or plandemic or whatever you want to call it, I feel like I've held back quite a bit on like the things that I've wanted to say, not based in fear, but a lot of times I just like, do I need to add more fuel to the fire? Does this really feel loving and kind? And so like, I'll go through these phases and stages of like, I feel like a lot of the work that I do with people is being like that permission grantor. I feel like honestly, that's like the majority of the coaching world is like to mirror people, support them, and give them permission to be themselves. Like if you were to distill down mentorship or coaching or healing work, it's literally that, right? At least for me, like what I've seen, like it's like giving permission for people to show up as they are, who they are in whatever capacity that is. And who doesn't need that? Like I even need that sometimes, like I'm working with a business coach that's just reminding me like, hey, if you want to launch something this particular way, do it. Who says you can't? It's really cool to have someone that you can mirror and brainstorm with though, right? Like when you're doing healing work with people, because we're not islands. Like it's really important to be supported, held, mirrored, and nourished. I feel like now more than ever, because we still live in like societal constructions that are super isolating. Like we live in houses by ourselves. We don't live in community structures. Like it was legit designed that way for a reason. I mean, if you you can even go back to the automobile industry versus public transportation or community transportation. They built it so that they could sell a product. Like Ford became a success and they moved away from public transportation to sell a product. I believe that our suburbs are designed a particular way to sell and capitalize on isolation. It's been industrialized. Comparison, like you're not enough. Like the beauty industry is a $14 billion industry that is capitalizing on women not feeling good to be themselves. And I mean, like that's that. So it's like this huge paradox, right? Like the coaching and mentor industry, like, and is trying to be like, yeah, be yourself, do yourself. And then we have like massive propaganda and like media structured and consumerism that's telling you the opposite. So it's just like, even this industry is still capitalizing in a way on this industry, right? So it's like, how, I don't know. It's just like coming to the place of like, what feels good. Like obviously breaking through massive levels of conditioning and trauma doesn't feel good, but doing it is like, well, if you don't do it, then you don't feel good either.
Mhm. Yes. I mean, I resonate with what you're saying for sure. I mean, going back to the first thing that you mentioned with coaching, really just being that facilitator and holding the space and giving people permission to really be their true authentic selves. And I mean, I do wear a lot of different hats. And one of the hats that I wear is a high school science teacher. And I remember my first year teaching, I had this one student tell me that my class was her favorite class because she felt like she could be herself in my class. And like that was huge for me because I wasn't intentionally doing that, but I did notice that students would gravitate towards me a lot. Like they wanted to come stay with me after school, even if they didn't really need tutoring, just because they wanted to, feel that. And so giving people permission to be themselves. And sometimes I know for me early on, when I was in relationship with people who really genuinely wanted my authentic self, at first, it was challenging because I didn't know who my authentic self was. I was like, oh, you want me to be myself? Well, hold on. I don't know who that is because I have for so long kept, trying to put on these different masks to please other people. And so when I first started meeting people who were challenging me to be my authentic self, it was a little scary at first.
Well, and I mean, like at any different stage and age, I mean, like there was times where it's like, I don't know. So like, I feel like I know myself better than most people might know themselves. And in that space, I'm like, I don't know who I am, right? Because we're just always like shedding layers and trauma and conditioning. And I do believe the human experience is completely trauma informed. I saw one coach say like, not everything is trauma. And it's like, yeah, it kind of is, because we're here to experience ourselves separate from source. So if we're going to experience ourselves separate from source, that's trauma. That is the 100% definition of being separate is trauma. The psychology or somatic world will define trauma in different ways. They'll say it's like you weren't safe to feel your feelings through an experience that appeared to cause harm. Well, then you're separate, right? If you're separate from your feelings, and feelings are energy and motion, and energy really is just source energy, that's separation consciousness. So everything in the human experience, just being human, is traumatic.
Absolutely. And I love that you're speaking upon that, because I was just like having some downloads about this the other day. Like being separate from source, being separate from God is like the number one original, trauma. We come here and then we've got to figure out how to get realigned and how to find that connection. And I remember one time a friend recommended that I do a float tank. So those are like, the really big Epsom salt tank thing.
I still have not done one.
Oh, no. Well, I did one,
Yeah.
and it's also like the float tank's also like you can't hear anything at all. It's a complete silence. So you don't hear anything from the outside world, not even like a little bit. So it's a very quiet, like super quiet. But the one I went to, like you could have it be dark in there, or you could turn on like these lights. So then it looked like you were looking at the stars. Yeah. And I instantly felt like I was floating in space, looking up at the stars, and I was like home. And because there was no distractions, I did, for the first time in my life, I felt a strong connection to God. Like the separation was completely removed, all the sounds and the senses and the other people and other energy and like all that just wasn't there. and it was amazing. But then as soon as I got out of the tank and it was like bombarded with all that other energy and stuff, it was like very overwhelming. But I remember like, oh, like this feels like home. Right?
Yeah.
You feel loved and held, and you're right there with source and not so far away. And I think I just went home and cried after that experience.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I don't think where I'm living now has float tanks, and they were all over in Florida. I didn't make a time, because it's like, I believe the things or the experiences like you had when you really feel called to do certain things, it really aligns with those extraordinary like glimpses or remembering or like that relationship with God, right? Like I could go to a float tank and not have that experience because that's not where I need to connect with source for me. Or other people can, because I know other people rave about it, like it really creates that meditation. I grew up with that in Alaska, right? So like I experienced that in nature and it's also here where I'm at in Taos, like it's so quiet because there's really not that many people. You can go and drive and be like in the middle of nowhere with no one around and it just be like silent. And it's like, wow, and I grew up with that as well. So it's like, I appreciate that because that really helps us, get quiet easier when the external is quiet. But for most people, the external is really noisy, It's like how, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people, and you probably speak to this because I think you teach or talk about meditation a lot too. Like I used to go around and teach it in schools to kids and hospitals, and people's definition or perception of meditation is often like really skewed too, right? Another tool to beat yourself up with. I'm not doing it right.
My mind won't shut up. I can't be
Yeah.
still.
Your mind isn't supposed to. It's always going to be going. And for some people more than others, it's just, I always tell people that's not the objective. You're not stilling your mind. You're learning to concentrate and focus on whatever it is. Maybe it's a candle, maybe it's a mantra, maybe it's your breath, and dropping into that and letting that expand. And the thoughts, when we begin to focus on something else, because I believe the brain is working like, well, some people will say like a monkey. I say like a 2-year-old because I was a mom and I've raised kids. 2-year-olds are just like, whatever you give them, they're like squirrel, like a dog, right? It's like ball, shiny object. And if you don't want that part of yourself to be attached to whatever that is, the holding that, you have to give it something else to focus on. And you don't take away what you're focusing on, right? Like to get rid of the thought. Instead, you just redirect your focus. And then whatever you had, you'll drop naturally and move in this direction. So then it creates a space of non-resistance, of just, right? To me, that's the path of least resistance. It's like the way the river goes. So if there's something blocking this way, it's gonna move and redirect the energy to create that flow. And I also feel like, at least this has been probably part of my struggle of like, is the path least resistance also like the conditioning or the trauma response of, no, it can't be easy because that's being lazy, right? And so it's like, why can't it be easy? Because like, I feel like nature shows us that things are easy, but we forget. So we're like, no, I want to go the hard way. I want to keep hitting my head against this wall because I don't deserve the easy way because that's lazy. And to me, like what I've seen personally for my path, and then for many clients I've worked with, lazy is trauma conditioning. There's no kid on the planet that's lazy. They're just not safe to be themselves. So then they shut down, and in their shutting down, it's appeared as being lazy.
Wow. You just said so many really great nuggets in those few minutes. But yeah, the whole like equating easy with lazy. And once again, in where I teach, there's some teachers who are like, oh, I have this kid, they're a great kid, but they're just so lazy. They won't do any work. They won't do this. They won't do that. I'm like, well, maybe it's because they have a reason. I know a lot of my students get off school and then they go work because they've got to help their parents pay the bills. And then they're exhausted and they fall asleep in class, or they fall asleep as they're doing work, or they might only show up, a couple days a week because there's just all this other stuff going on. And, but yeah, they're not necessarily lazy. And I love that you talk about even with ourselves, like giving ourselves permission to not just be ourselves, but to take the easy way, because we can, and it's available for us. And I know for me, I have a hard time with rest. To me, rest feels lazy. But I'm currently menstruating, and the second day is always like the worst. So yesterday, Friday, was going to be the second day. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take the day off of work. I'm going to actually rest. And for the first time in like years, I didn't just take the day off and then do a whole bunch of chores, right? Like I took the day off and I just rested. And once I got through that first like couple hours of my mind being like, oh, but we need to do this and we need to do that, like I felt like so great. And I feel so much better today because I did take that day to rest.
I love that. And then also too, like what you're saying, like I've caught this with another friend, like when we keep holding ourselves in the past, right? So every cycle you have is a new cycle. And if we're really not hanging on to every cycle I have, the second day is the worst, and we actually change the way that we're embodying and carrying the past with us into the now, because every cycle you can have can be different and new, because you're really creating space for that beautiful release, right? Of that, I don't have to have that programming, like that I can clear that programming. And so that kind of leads me into like the Ho'oponopono work I do, right? And we've talked about this, and you've done a little bit of that, of like clearing because you have a memory of like whatever your original memory of the second day being the worst. And then that creates a program and encoding for you to expect that. So we expect the past in our present because we carry it with us and we put it here. And then that starts to design our future. Your future cycles don't have to have a second day that's typically the worst, right? That's been something that's been encoded, and then you get used to it, because it's safe for us to live in a predictable world. And what this pandemic, whatever people want to call it, COVID, is really the Uranus energy, like astrology wise, it's helping us to shake these parts of us up. So we don't have to expect what we've gotten in the past, and that we can create space. Like what you just did, you changed like you said, the mind, you were starting to change, your mind was going crazy, but you were like, no, because my second day doesn't have to be the worst. And so I'm going to learn to do it different. Right. And you started to shift and change and clear that programming of like, no, maybe it's because my body, my heart, my mind are asking me for something and I'm not listening. But then I'm just like, kind of like on a default setting of like, well, this is what it's supposed to be. And it's like, no, like, life can be, uncertain, unpredictable, but also like it can be loving and hopeful, and which are all things that can be in that unknown space, right? Of where we're reprogramming ourselves, clearing the cache, so to speak, of like what was, and creating space for us to be with what is, which most of what is that's coming to our awareness is what was, right? And giving ourselves the spaciousness to be present with whatever that is, so that it can clear, through whatever emotional response or physical response that you actually need in that moment to be supported. Because I feel like the world is not a world that gives us permission to rest. And more women now than ever are saying, no, but that's what we need. Like we have been running on fumes, running on frenzied fear, anxious separation, rather than restful, loving, nurturing, supportive energy, which is to me the foundation of what we all need, including myself. Like I don't know necessarily, or have created a life that I feel like deeply supported and nurtured in. I feel like I'm moving in that direction of being like, well, what does that look like? Like, how can I call that in? Like, for sure on the inside, but also like what people will resonate with that space. How can I curate the life that will create that? Because when we start doing that, when we start giving ourselves permission to do that, like you said, taking that day off, that starts to be the norm in workplaces where they can be like, yeah, like for women, maternity leave is like important for men and women to nurture the core family instead of creating this division. To be on your cycle when you're supposed to be more inward and listening to what you're being asked to clear. Yeah, take a day off, because that's supportive to the whole, not just to the I, right? And so I really appreciate that share. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, and thank you for that perspective on that and shifting things and about permission to rest, but also remembering, like you said, with the past and the future. And really, I feel like kind of going back to meditation, that's what's really helped me learn how to be in the present moment and to sit with whatever shows up. So even if my mind is thinking a lot, just observing, like, well, what are those thoughts? Are there any patterns that are coming up or showing up? And I notice if I don't meditate, at least for just like 5 minutes a day, I will start to have a little bit more anxiety throughout, and it's because I'm not sitting still and I'm not listening to some of those parts that need to be heard about whatever it is. And then usually if I just finally sit down and meditate, I'll be able to move through whatever that is. And then I won't feel anxious anymore. And so it's just like more, important to give ourselves that time to be present with ourselves, to allow whatever comes up to unfold. And I know you mentioned Ho'oponopono because that's really big with a lot of the work that you do. And a lot of people that are listening to this are probably going to be familiar with that, but there might be some people watching who are not as familiar. So could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Ho'oponopono is the actual phrase ho apostrophe oponopono is ho is to mean the cure. So it's like really to bring a cure, and pono means to make right. And so it's pono to make doubly right. So the original Hawaiian prayer is really to make right relationship between you and another. And the way that Dr. Hugh Lin started learning and working with this was to come back in alignment with source or 0 point energy, and to be able to clear all that is showing up in your environment and experience and relationship, to clear it on a core level within yourself. And that's everything. And so the prayer is, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. There's no right way to say it or the order, I'm sure if people say that, then that is a form of separation. Anything that is based in duality, because life is paradoxical, they're gonna hold both. And when you learn how to hold the both, you learn how to hold the whole. It doesn't mean you're not here to experience the both. You are. I mean, that's a part of the human experience, the dance of separation, the dance of forgetting and remembering and coming back into source connection. But Ho'oponopono, many people for many years are like, oh, I know what that is. I say that. And then they'll take a class with me or a course with me and they'll be like, oh my God, I had no idea how deep this work goes. And I feel like a lot of people aren't necessarily ready to go that deep, right? My classes and courses tend to be really small because, as you know, like it touches core wounds, and not everyone's ready to face a lot of the pain that they still hold inside themselves. And that's okay. Like there's no judgment with this work. So I love just sharing more about it. Right now I have a group, Ho'oponopono Global Evolution, I think has like 650 members that are, and I want to say like a good, probably 80% of the group's pretty active. So I've been doing a 21-day challenge where I'm just clearing on different energies and aspects. And then if people feel called, just by getting to know me, getting to know my energy, what I talk about, and they feel called, they can sign up for the course. And so that's linked in that group. We can probably always link my page under this group. So you just go to my website if you want to learn more, angelabenck.com. It's right on the homepage or the courses, and you click. The page kind of goes over a little bit of the outline, kind of my background. I met Dr. Hulin almost 15 years ago, and he really just expanded my consciousness of like really coming into awareness with 100% responsibility, and the depth of this prayer and working with the mother, father, child within, and being able to connect these energies deeper. And I'm always learning and growing with this work, having done this work, I do feel like I carry a level of mastery. And that's why I feel like 2 years ago, Spirit asked me to teach on it. but I'm always learning how to clear deeper levels within myself, deeper levels of separation, deeper levels of, and I don't mean clearing it. Like when I say clearing, I don't mean like getting rid of, like when we're here to feel a feeling. But the feeling often is been rejected, judged, shamed, and then it's attached to a particular memory, which creates stories, which creates the world that we live in. So when I'm talking about clearing, I'm talking about clearing the story that's attached to the suppression. So you make space for the energy to move, right? We're here to be energy, emotion. We're here to have emotional experiences. And I feel like we're here to be deeply human. And in that deeply human space is when I feel like the most awareness to your divinity comes into beingness.
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually teaching a workshop tomorrow on emotions and emotional resilience.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm super excited about. It's the first time I've taught this workshop, but I've wanted to teach it for years, and I finally, it's just like, I'm gonna do it. But yeah, and that's one thing I really admire about your work is in working with Ho'oponopono. Like I took one of your courses and it was great, and I really got, some deep clarity on some limiting beliefs that I wasn't really sure that were still there. And so I was able to continue to, clear on those and change stories. And what I appreciate so much about you and the work that you do is you're doing it too.
Yeah.
And you're not just like teaching these courses and, just to make money or whatever, like scamming people. Like you are teaching this work because you have done the work and are continuing to do the work. And I, have been following you for several years, and it's just like, I am able to see like the growth and the expansion that's created. And I've seen you become more feminine, and like reclaiming that, divinity. And it's inspiring. And that kind of thing is what encourages me to keep doing the work too. Seeing that you're showing up and, you're still in that. I just love how like 100% like transparency. You still post about like having bad days and, feeling like, oh my God, this is too overwhelming or whatever. And the great days and the love and the bliss and everything in between.
Absolutely.
And
I love that. And I've loved being able to watch you rise too, because I knew you had this part of you that wanted to express and wanted to teach and dance and do all of these things. But it was just like, you were in a space where it was just debilitating for you to move into that space. And then you just kept, showing up, being kind and gentle and loving to yourself and doing your work. And it definitely pays off, right? That the inner work isn't always rewarded because it's not often seen right away. And most people equate inner work with like mad manifestation skills. Like, oh, my inner work's paying off because I'm doing 10 and 20K months. I mean, that's what the collective coaching industry does now. Oh, I hit my first million. Like that doesn't mean they're doing inner work. That means that they are probably really fucking good at hustling, because I see a lot of women that are really good at hustling, and, no judgment with that. Maybe they're made to be that way. Maybe they're made to work like and grind. And that's a part of their personality, right? That's a part of like how the divine is showing up with them, but that doesn't equate with someone doing inner work. And that's what I feel like that is the biggest disconnect, that people are like, they equate having mad manifestation skills as inner work. And I feel like that's considered a part of like the new age false paradigm. That's not the truth. Just because one person is made to manifest and work at that level doesn't mean that we're all made to manifest and be expressions or be millionaires. Do I feel like we have access to infinite amounts of wealth and abundance more than ever before? Yes. Does that align with your heart and soul? Like, are you made to be that way? Like, does that mean you're not doing, and I just find that there's always like that catch of like, ooh, if this isn't showing up, then I'm not doing this. And I feel like that's more beliefs that are more of the lies or more the programming of separation. That's not the truth. I do believe that we are here to be supported and loved. Now that can look different for everyone, right? What looks like loving and support for me is going to be based on my level of connection with source and how that's going to show up from my experience. What's loving and supportive for you is going to look like what that needs to look like for you and the expression that you're here to be. Do I feel like if we were both millionaires, you know, sitting here chatting, that at least most of the people that I've met that are millionaires, they have deep amounts of unprocessed trauma, and they're constantly trying to prove themselves through money. And so I've personally met very few in deep spiritual integrity millionaires or multimillionaires. And not that they're not out there, they absolutely are. And I pray that that shift starts to happen on the planet, that we stop looking for the results outside for the results that are inward, right? Your deep states of peace are not dependent upon an outer result. And so, you know, just like that to me is the reinforcement, and that's the huge indication of separation of source. And I'm not going to say like, well, I've mastered that piece, because out here is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's seductive, you know, it in the best possible way. You know, seductive can be negative or it can be positive. It pulls you to engage, but if you're not anchored in the truth first, it's easy to forget that we are creating this, and it's not result driven. Like, we live in a consumeristic result driven world that is based in separation consciousness. So then we, as people who are aligning on our path or in our heart space, are looking outward to be like, well, they're getting this result, and that means they're doing the inner work. That should show up for me that way. And it's like, no, like, as soon as you have that thought, you've just been separate from source.
Yeah, I mean, I really resonate with a lot of that, because I've been going through some of that too. Right now, I have a business coach, and I'm like starting to do this less, and that's why I'm actually getting results. But in the beginning, I was comparing myself to everybody else in the program and to my coach. Well, they're doing this and they're getting that, so I'll do this and maybe I'll get that too. Right. And I mean, nothing was happening, nothing was moving. It wasn't until I decided, well, you know what, I'm just going to treat it more like a menu. Like, here are all these different things, and I'm going to pick and choose what I actually want to do, and maybe add a little bit of extra spices in there that aren't on the menu, and see what happens. And like, now, like, all this stuff is like, it's like I've really just started focusing on the inner work, solely the inner work, and letting go of expectations of actually manifesting anything. And it was in that, like, just doing the inner work with no expectations and no like specific things, that I've created the space for the universe to actually work on my behalf and to move through me. And now I've got, you know, more money than I've had in a really long time, but that wasn't like the end goal. It was just all I focus on is today, like, what can I do to deepen my relationship with source? Like, what can I do to deepen my relationship with myself? Yeah. And then everything else just comes after that, I feel like.
So pay attention, listeners. Those questions I feel like in your comments, you need to write those questions, because those are questions that we all need to be asking ourselves. What do I need to deepen my connection to source? Like Kristen just said it for you guys all. Like, those are winners right there. What do I need to deepen my connection with myself? And then let your actions move from those places, because then you're connected and into your beingness. And I'm breaking free of patterns and conditions currently of needing to do stuff a particular way, and really just even the doing, right? Of moving from a place of being, my actions will be aligned, and no longer my doing will be in separation. And that's been like really like such huge ahas for me lately, because when I was in Florida, I created an amazing community that's still flourishing because I spent the time to grow and cultivate that. And so the foundation of that, I built that, but it didn't sustain and feel good for me at my core. because I was creating it from a place of separation. I was, like outwardly being like, I want to create this so that I'll feel good versus feeling good and creating from a place of feeling good. So most of these things, like saying that sounds so easy, right? And then it's like you put that into practice and that's next level, because it's going to bump up against the parts of you that are like, that have always been rewarded from a separated doing place. So it's like going upstream again, like hitting our heads against things that worked for us before. And they're like, that's not loving, that's not connected, that's not supported. And we see so many other people still actually living and creating results based from that place, just from a business place. That's been one of the biggest beliefs or even obstacles that I'm having to currently clear from, because I'm not here to be for everyone. I'm not here to be liked by everyone. I'm not here to teach and work with everyone. I'm not here to be friends with everyone. That part I feel really good with. For the longest time, I didn't. That part I feel good with. Now it's like moving into, okay, I don't have to subscribe to the old paradigm of even doing business. Now that feels like swimming upstream right now, because there's all of these models and even the people that are saying you can do it whatever way you want, they're still doing the old models while saying that, like their vibration and actions and words are not matching, which is fine, right? There's many times where we get in that place where we're not in alignment, and we can see it like blatantly, like, oh my God, they're not in alignment either, but they're getting results. How come I can't be in alignment and get results, And then all these people are like, well, you must be in alignment to get results. And I also feel like at some level, that's a belief system. And I call bullshit to that as well, because that's feeding the not enough. That's feeding the separation consciousness. You must do this and generate those feelings and that. And I'm like, yeah, no. What if I don't believe in that? I don't believe that's the truth. I do believe that's a part of separation consciousness. I do believe that the majority of the people believe that, because again, that's a part of them needing to prove themselves worthy to be connected to source. It's sneaky. The stuff is so sneaky, right? And when I'm saying this, it's not like I'm saying this to an audience. I'm saying this to myself. So I can hear this for me.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh man, we've touched on some really, really nice, juicy, deep stuff, which I love. And I'm really glad and really grateful that you were able to come on the podcast today. I guess it kind of feels like we're wrapping up a little bit. So is there anything else you want to share? I know you mentioned, you have your courses and your website and stuff, and I'll make sure I put that in the description so people can get in contact with you. But do you have anything else you want to share?
No, I feel like we definitely hit some really juicy, big topics, things to meditate on and be present with. And yeah, I mean, if you're interested in breaking through beliefs, my course signups are happening now. We begin February 22nd, 7 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Mountain time. It's a 6-week course and it's a deep dive. We definitely work with core beliefs, core wounds. And if you're ready to meet yourself there, I'd love for you to join us. Thank you.
Yes. And I highly recommend, if you are ready for that deep work, that Angela is a really great person to work with, because she is, authentic, and she's just really good at holding space for people to move through stuff, because she's good at holding space for herself as well.
So thank you for having me. It's always good to catch up with you, and I'm excited to watch your evolution as well. And you drop some good nuggets for people too. And then you have to put your class notes below, right? Are you still doing signups for your course?
Oh yeah, I am still doing sign up for my course. So I finally have finished a Reiki 1 and 2 intensive program Dragonfly Heart Reiki Academy is now a thing. And if you are interested in learning more about Reiki and deepening this connection to source and yourself, you can sign up. It's ongoing enrollment. So like the first Saturday of each month, we do like a kickoff call. So it's kind of like cohorts And right now there's still tons of space. So I can put information about my stuff in there as well. And if you're interested in that, you can read the info page and reach out via email if you have questions. And we thank you so much for tuning in and listening, and hope that this was helpful and resonated with you as much as it did with us. And enjoy the rest of your day or evening, wherever you are.